What is going on, YouTube fitness family? I got an exciting video for you today. It's one of the most commonly asked questions I get is how to get a bigger back, and one of my favorite movement patterns is lat pull downs, and I think it's also one of the most improperly done movements by the majority of people that go to the gym because they're just trying to get the weight from A to B. But I'm gonna show you guys exactly how to maximize your lat pull down from the grip to the range of motion to the form cues. So I hope you guys enjoy this video. Without further ado, let's get into it. All right, number one tip I'm going to give you is increasing your range of motion. So one of the biggest things I see people do when they do lat pull downs is whatever their grip, they shorten the range of motion to be here. So they'll go like this, and then they'll come up to about here. And it makes sense intuitively to want to keep it locked in, but what we want to do is maximize motor recruitment. So we're actually going to lean forward, we're going to reach for the rep, and you see I still have my lats are engaged because I'm keeping those elbows kind of bowed a little bit. I'm not completely straightening them. I'm getting a stretch to the lat instead of it's going straight into my biceps and forearms. So I'm gonna be here, big stretch, open that tissue before driving down and in. And what that's gonna do is it's going to allow for, like I said, that greater motor recruitment. And when we can have more motor recruitment through the entirety of the lat, you're going to inevitably get more growth. So I've shown a lot too is something called stretch mediated hypertrophy. If you can stretch that tissue at the top of your rep and provide load in that lengthened position, so when I'm up here, I'm going to inevitably drive more hypertrophy. It's science, so that's me just making shit up. So start to lengthen the range of motion on your lat pull downs. That's number one. Tip number two is increasing time under tension. So what I mean by that is increasing the time that actually takes you to perform the rep. So a lot of people I'll see do lat pull downs like this. It's just A to B. But what you're doing is there's a force curve. As you come down fast and then release, there's a little bit of momentum on the bar and you're completely losing any contractions to the lat. So what I want to see you do is you could go explosive on the down here, but squeeze and then release slowly. And you see one form cue I'm gonna give you guys is pretend like you're releasing the weight through your lats and not just letting it up slow, because you could just let it up slow, but you could still let it up through your biceps and through your front delts. What I wanna see is lock in, squeeze, and then slowly release through the lat. So what I'd say is especially for your first 2 to 3 sets, instead of, or even one set, instead of just going right into explosive reps, what I want to see you do is pull down and through, squeeze, retract the scapula, get a 1 second pause, and then slow on the release. Big stretch, open up the tissue, drive down, squeeze, slow on the release. And by increasing the time under tension, it's going to do 2 things. Number one is drive more growth, because they've proven more time retention, more hypertrophy. Number 2 is it's going to allow you to use a weight that's going to keep the impetus in your lats. A lot of times people just want to use progressive overload, heavier week. What that's going to do, if you don't have proper form, you're not recruiting the proper tissue, you might be able to move heavier weight, but you might be using lower back, momentum, biceps, and that's not the point. So I see a lot of guys have really heavy pull downs, but they don't really have a very developed back. And that's really lends itself to the fact that they're really not focusing on contracting the proper muscle groups, which for us is going to be that X-frame, that lower lat, that mid lat, the rhomboid, the teres, even down through kind of like that infraspinatus, which connects into that lower back. So all that detail is going to come from really perfecting this movement pattern. Point number 3 is be able to have a positive momentum, but controlling the eccentric. That's the most important part to add time under tension. So I'm going to show you guys how to get a explosive positive while not losing tension in the lats. So I'm gonna get that big stretch. I'm gonna find the base of that impetus in the lats, that stretch position. I'm gonna feel that stretch. And then as I drive down, I'm gonna squeeze in, get that 1/2 second to 1 second pause, big stretch, drive, squeeze. And by having that explosive positive, it allows us to dig the weight down to where we get that maximal range of motion at the bottom of the rep. Good scapular retraction, and then slow on the eccentric. So I would say when you're learning, really focus on just not really being super explosive. So you can come here, squeeze, and having not a super explosive concentric, it's gonna help you. But once you start to master these, I wanna be here. So really focusing more on that time under tension on the eccentric as opposed to the concentric. So we're not limiting ourselves by having a super slow concentric where you're not gonna get as much of your growth. So surprisingly enough, you're probably gonna get more growth in this movement pattern on the way up than the way down. So start shifting the way you think about moving away from A to B, because a lot of people think most of the growth is gonna come from A to B, but it's actually from going back from B to A is where you're gonna actually experience the most and the highest level of hypertrophy. We're gonna talk about bar path and body positioning. So I'm gonna have you stay there for the bar path. And this is another one that gets done the most poorly, I feel like, where you could be getting the most out of the movement pattern. And a lot of people, when they do their pull downs, will do one of two major mistakes. One is using a lot of momentum and over rowing here, where you're gonna take it into the mid back. It's not, let's say, an improper movement, but it's not what you're really trying to target, which is gonna be the X frame. So if you go over pull, you're gonna go, it's turning it more into like a seated row. The other thing I see people do is roll the shoulders down over the movement. So at the bottom of the movement, they'll do this. And that's over exaggerated, but even here is wrong. Because what you're doing is collapsing the chest and you're losing the impetus in the chest or in the back. So I'm gonna show you the first one, which is incorrect. And you see how my back is collapsed? Now watch this minor adjustment. See how my back completely opens up and allows me to take the movement in the lats, as opposed to here, it's gonna go all into the bicep and front delt. So that is going to obviously take away from your movement pattern. So the biggest cues I want you to take with the bar path is gonna be reaching through at the top. So big stretch the lats, slight elbow bend. As you pull, you're gonna lean back very slightly, just to where you get to about a 90-degree angle. Because you can see I'm almost above 90. I'm at about 100 degrees. I'm gonna pull back to where I'm about 90, pull the chest open, shoulders down and back, and squeeze my elbows down and in. So instead of pulling here, I'm pulling here and squeezing those elbows tight to the body and then slow on the release. Pull with your elbows. That's another big form cue. Instead of pulling with your hands are just a conduit. So I would say biggest thing is close your eyes and pretend like you're pulling with your elbows, not your hands. Your hands are just a connection to the bar. I'm stretching, feeling those lats, and then I'm pulling with the elbows, squeezing through, slow on the release. I know it sounds super lame, guys, but when you're starting out, don't be afraid to close your eyes and really create that mind-muscle connection at the gym. And I know it sounds super sus, and I think people are gonna be watching you like stroking this bar with your eyes closed. But that being said, it's gains over everything, and nobody's really watching you. You might think people are watching you work out. You might want them to be watching you work out. At the end of the day, probably everybody's focused on themselves in the gym. So be in your own lane, make sure you're focusing on your form. Close your eyes, feel that mind-muscle connection. It's gonna help you a lot. As you start to progress these movement patterns, go heavier and heavier, you wanna make sure you have that mind-muscle connection locked in to prevent injury, to make sure you're getting growth in the right areas, and also just make sure you're not just coming in here wasting your time just moving weight around to move weight around, because obviously nobody loves to waste time. All right, next thing we're talking about is rep ranges. So how many reps are we doing? Are we doing 20, are we doing 30, or are we doing 5? If we're gaming for hypertrophy, which most people doing a lat pull down, they're not really training for strength in this specific exercise. A lot of times it's more for aesthetics. We want to shoot for that anywhere 8 at the very minimum to even up to 20 to 25 reps at the very maximum. But if you're using a lot of time under tension like I've taught you, I think that real sweet spot is anywhere between 8 and 14 reps, because that's just going to maximize really keeping it in the back and not starting to fire through other body parts. So if you really start to get to failure at 8, another thing I'm gonna teach you guys is the intensity technique I use. So let's say I get to rep number 8 or 9 and I'm almost at failure with that really good tempo. So I'm here, squeezing, slow on the up, and I'm pretty much dead at this point. Let's say it's rep 9, 10, 11. I'm gonna fire through 4 to 5 slightly faster reps. 1, 2. And what that's gonna do, it's kind of a exhaust technique. So I'm pre-exhausting with those slightly slower reps, and then I make fully exhausting because I can't do any more of those slow reps. So it's almost a mechanical drop set. Instead of dropping the weight, I'm changing the form slightly so I can get the most out of each and every set. The next one is another intensity technique I like a lot, where it's called partial rep failure reps. So we're going to get to the very end of our set, and instead of just putting it down, so like, oh, I'm dead, what you can do is scapular retract and pull half reps. And this is a great technique to drive additional hypertrophy, because what they've shown is driving partial reps in the lengthened position at the end of a set can be very effective for continuing growth. But you can't pull here. If you pull here, all bicep. Watch the difference. See how the bar stays in front of me? Keeping in the lats. I'm not here pulling with the biceps just to get more reps. I'm here. Shoulders down and back, chest open, pulling those partial reps as deep as I can get them with the lats. So it's almost like the partials almost turn into like a pullover, because you're here really digging those last few reps through the lats instead of, like I said, pulling down and then dropping the shoulder. Biggest things I can tell you, if you film yourself and you see yourself here, gotta drop that shoulders back, chest opens up. You're gonna get so much more like impetus and failure through the lats, as opposed to biceps, where a lot of people, and forearms, where a lot of people feel failure in this type of movement pattern. Next one, people always ask me, what's like the best attachment? I would say palms pronated on basically one of these lat pull down bars is probably my favorite. A V grip can also be very effective, but I'm gonna show you guys how to effectively use the V grip a little differently than you would use this bar. There's two ways you can do this. One is still tuck underneath, but tuck yourself towards the back of the seat, because what it's gonna allow you to do is keep the V grip in front of you and do more of a kind of hybrid between a pullover and a pull down. Because if you come all the way in and you come over the top, you almost lost all the impetus in your lats. It's gonna be a lot of mid-back, also biceps, forearms. My favorite variation is come all the way back behind the bench. You can go kneeling with both, or on two, or on one knee. I like it on both because it's completely balanced. I'm gonna pull down, squeeze in front, and pull lower than you would think you need to. So it's almost like that hybrid between a pullover and a pull down, and that's really gonna keep that impetus in the lats and out of, like we talked about, biceps and rear delts and mid back. So squeeze in front, squeeze slow on the eccentric, kind of like arc out, reach for it, stretch the lats, dig underneath. And this is honestly like one of my favorite lat movements. Go about 50%, maybe 60% of what you do for a lat pull down where you're tucked underneath, because you can't use any momentum because you're not tucked underneath the pad, but also it's a very unique movement where you're coming in front here, and it's very hard to do with a lot of weight. And so kind of hybrid between a pullover and a pull down. And obviously you can't do as heavy with a pull over as you can with a pull down. So just remember that, go a lot lighter on this. The grips I'd probably stay away from more is a true supinated. You're just gonna get so much bicep activation on that. It's really hard to get lats because your elbows are so closely tucked to your sides. Inevitably, unless you have a really far lean back and squeeze through, it's really hard to get a good engagement through your lats. So I would probably stay away from a supinated grip. What you can also do is kind of a wider neutral grip. That I don't love for myself because I feel like it limits my range of motion, because with a V, I really come here, whereas out here, you're losing a little bit of that stretch position. So for me, I would rather use narrow, like a neutral grip, opposed to the wide grip. You see the ones like the wide handles. Rope, I'm not a huge fan of, other than for like high pulls, upper back, or for a pullover. But for a row, like a pull down, I probably don't think it's the most effective grip. And then lastly, handles for single arm are tremendous. We're not covering that today, but we'll do another video of some of my other favorite lat building exercises, and that's one of them. Is kind of a single arm supinated pull down where you can really lean out, get a huge impetus through the lats. So last thing I'm gonna cover, I'm about to bring them over, is grips. And grips are so important when it comes to building a back, because you can't have, I've got big ass forearms, guys. Like I got like people like notably like call out my forearms, like holy shit. But even with that, I know I wasn't using them to show you guys this video, but I was doing a weight that was very manageable for me, so I could show you. Whenever I do back, I would drive home to get my grips before I did my back day without grips. And they're that important, because if you're using time under tension and you're trying to have these little muscles right here keep up with this, it's just not gonna happen. You're gonna always limit yourself with your grip strength. So don't think about that whole like, oh, well, you're gonna have small forearms. Like, I don't train forearms, kid you not. Even with the grips, my forearms still burn because there's so much time under tension So I'll show you guys exactly ones I use. They're called Cobra grips. I'm gonna grab them. So these are Cobra grips. You can buy them on Amazon. They're really not super expensive. They last you for years. The great thing about them is they strap in here, and then all you have to do is either wrap it over a bar, or you can use it like a lifting strap. But you don't have all of that extra strap that obviously makes it so hard to grip in. Like literally, it's as simple as that or that, you're done. So I would highly recommend using these on your back day. It will accelerate your back progress. Like I guarantee you like 2 to 3x if you're not using them up to this point. It's just one less thing to think about. If you're like, how annoying is it to be like having a great back workout and then your forearms just give out? Like it's just not a good feeling, and it shouldn't be the case, especially if you're trying to build for hypertrophy. So those are my biggest tips, but I hope you guys love this type of video. I'm gonna start trying to do some of these more concentrated movement patterns I see a lot of people do incorrectly, and show you how to kind of make small tweaks to them to make them so much more effective for you. So if you're really loving this type of content, please comment below. It means the world to me. Like this video, subscribe to the channel. Without further ado, love you guys. I will see you on the next video.